Detailed History of the Federal Reserve Notes, Part 2. We now move into the second major phase of the Federal Reserve Note, which comes in four relatively minor subphases, if you will. These are the days, of course, the Federal Reserve Notes only exist in denominations 5 through 100. That will quickly change, as we will see. And in the first phase, we saw these briefly in the previous one, but now we'll look at these more closely. As you can see, nothing has changed. It's all authorized by the Federal Reserve Act of December 23, 1913. This is actually a series of 1914. Blue seals, blue serial numbers. Treasurer Burke and Secretary of the Treasury McAdoo. Federal Reserve Note everywhere. The United States of America, and not merely the individual bank, will pay to the bearer on demand $5 or whatever the amount may be. And on the back side, there'd be the denomination, Federal Reserve Note again, some artwork, the denomination again, and I will read this again fresh and anew. This note is receivable by all national and member banks and Federal Reserve banks, and for all taxes, customs, and other public dues. It is redeemable in gold on demand at the Treasury of the Department of the Treasury Department of the United States in the city of Washington, District of Columbia, or in gold or lawful money at any Federal Reserve Bank. So, which is not changed from what it had before with the Red Seal Day. So, as I said, the first era was Burke and Glass. And somewhere in that era, the seals, however, went from red to blue. So that was the beginning of the new phase, and no longer the first of the Federal Reserve Notes. Now, during the time that we had Burke and McAdoo, however, two dates of some significance, both in 1918, made possible things for the series of 1918, though they were probably first seen sometime in 1919. We have the date of April 23, 1918, which is not relevant so much to the Federal Reserve Note. It is of relevance to the introduction of a Series 1918 version of some Federal Reserve Bank notes. The point is, we don't want to confuse that date with the date that will be relevant to what we have here at the next phase, namely the large denomination Federal Reserve notes that also appear as series of 1918. So, and that would be the date of September 26, 1918. Reason being because December 18 of 1918, the McAdoo is replaced with Glass, who, by the way, was one of the architects of the Federal Reserve bill that President Wilson signed in December 23 of 1913. So that introduces the next subphase, in which all of these are the same as before, except that instead of being Burke and McAdoo, they are now Burke and Glass. So all of these are the same. They're still Series 1914. Apparently, in the old large size days, they never thought of putting letters after the name. They would, after the date, as you will see they do in the small size. They just have the same date until there's a major change, which does not happen in the large size Federal Reserve Note. Not the change of the coloring of the seals, nor the introduction of the Federal Reserve Bank notes or anything going on with them. So we have the same two signatures. But then we come our new additions, and let's take a look at these additions here. The next denomination up is the $500 Federal Reserve Note, And now you'll see, authorized by Federal Reserve Act of December 23, 1913, as amended by Act of September 26, 1918. So, since it was legally created then, it is series of 1918, although by the time they come out, we are now in the era of Burke and Glass. So, but it still has the same thing. The United States of America will pay to the bearer on demand $500. So the bigger denominations don't come along until Series 1918 and remain Series 1918, while the other denominations remain Series 1914. So in the back, you got Federal Reserve, you got the denomination, and here you actually have a description. De Soto discovering the Mississippi. So a Spanish explorer named De Soto is discovering the Mississippi River. But this other thing is the same. This note is receivable by all national and member banks and Federal Reserve banks, and for all taxes, customs, and other public dues, period. It is redeemable in gold on demand at the Treasury Department of the United States in the city of Washington, District of Columbia, or in gold or lawful money at any Federal Reserve Bank. Now, it mentions something here about national and member banks. And remember, there were still the national bank systems, and then there were also other member banks, which is to say, American banks all had to be made, as it were, member banks of the Federal Reserve. So, but as you see, the verbiage is still the same. It has not changed. The only thing that's different is that the bigger denominations, you see, have Series 1918. And they start their signatures with Burke and Glass. So, but there it is, Series of 1918, December 23 of 1913, and amended by September 26, 1918. So the series of 18, and you can see they've got the same, 1 through 12. 12 is L, which is San Francisco, California, whereas 2 is B, which is New York, New York. So, and the larger size denominations come only with the blue seals. Now, this is not totally complete. I have to confess I'm not totally complete here. Most important is that the larger denominations were not only the 500 and the 1,000, but also a 5,000 and a 10,000, which, as it is, I do not have as samples here. Perhaps some point I can get the pictures of them, but at any rate, the other thing about it is that these two denominations, along with at least some, and occasionally maybe one or the other of the other denominations, though I'm not so sure there's so much of that, their production would continue on into the next two signature combinations that come in this major phase. But they are much rarer, especially the 500, which is almost unheard of from the next signature, and still also pretty rare for the final set of signatures for this era of the Federal Reserve notes. So these two here are going to have to be the stand-ins for Burke and Glass. Then this next one, which will be Burke and Houston, and finally this last one, which will be White and Mellon. Okay, but they actually came here, and so I'm going to leave them there. So the next subphase is simply what started in February 2 of 1920, and that would be, now it's still, the treasurer is still Burke, and now we have a Secretary of Treasury named Houston. So he was only there for a short period, so sometimes his notes are a little harder to find, but they're all out there. And there we go, Burke and Houston again. No other changes, front or back. So it's kind of nice to see the same pictures. So yeah, let's go ahead and enjoy the pictures again. There they are on the back of the 5. We just saw the 10. And then here's the 20. and Burke and Houston. But other than that, it's the same as the other that we saw. And then you have the 50. It has Burke and Houston. Again, with this commemoration of Panama. Finally, the $100. Also, Burke and Houston. And it's complex and symbolic back that I'm not sure what it means, but at any rate, there it is. Kind of pretty in any event. And then, on May 2 of 1921, we get the next couple, which are White and Mellon. Now, you get both of them changed because oftentimes, say, both the Treasury officers, in fact, all of them, including the Register, are generally appointed by the President of the United States. A new incoming president may leave some of these officers in control for a while, but when he gets around to it, he would appoint new officers unless he's really satisfied. Oftentimes, this happens when there's a change of party. So, Burke and McAdoo and Glass and Houston, you see, were all appointed by, let's see here. Yeah, we're all appointed by Woodrow Wilson. But then Warren G. Harding becomes president, who then appoints White and Mellon. So White becomes the treasurer and Mellon becomes the secretary of the Treasury. But that is all. So now we have two names changing, but everything else is the same as always. $5, blue seal, blue serial numbers, Federal Reserve note, but it's White and Mellon. It's all series of 1914. And Federal Reserve note, same pictures. Same for the $10 for White and Mellon. Okay. And the $20 White and Mellon. $50 White and Mellon. And finally the $100 White and Mellon. So no differences there. Well, that gets us through this next major phase. And as I said, even though I don't have any here, there would be 500s of thousands, also 5,000s and 10,000s. That would also have Carter and Houston instead of Glass. And then finally, they would have White and Mellon. And though, at least for the 500 and the 1,000, those exist. And they may or may not exist for the larger ones. Anyway, so that is this era of the Federal Reserve note. And now this will lead directly into another era, which has a very, very obvious and substantial change. First of all, the size of the note. And second of all, we now change the Treasurer of the United States, even while keeping the same Secretary of the Treasurer. So you can see, let's take the $10 note, for example. So for the next series, we'll be okay. White is replaced with Tate, and there are no small with White, and there are no large with Tate, no small with White. Okay, so the change from the large size to the small size comes about the same time as the transition from White to Tate. However, as you can see, Mellon simply stays there as the Secretary of the Treasury. There will be other changes as well. Lincoln, of course, remains on the $5. However, Jackson, as we know, will be moved to the $20. Okay. Grover Cleveland, we will see on the $1,000. Okay. And so forth. Grant stays on the 50. Benjamin Franklin stays on the 100. The $100. On the $500, Marshall, who was the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, in case you're curious who he is, will be replaced with President McKinley. And Hamilton will be moved to the $10 bill. There he is. Got that even the same picture, pretty much. Will be, well, he moves to the $10 and gets replaced with Grover Cleveland on a $1,000. So that's what's going to happen there, but that's just kind of introducing what comes next. Thanks for listening.